Nami vs Sanji from One Piece, Bon vs Meliodas from the Seven Deadly Sins, Naruto vs Jiraiya from Naruto, and in the last matchup we have Levi from Attack on Titan versus Guts from Berserk. There are so many characters that have amazing backstories, but in the end there can only be one. You have probably heard me say this 100 times by now, but characters are what truly make me fall in love with a series. And one of the best tools to make a character really come to life is a good backstory. Just about every series that I mentioned today has tons of really awesome backstories, and I could honestly make videos on all of them, and maybe I will in the future. But for now, I thought it'd be a lot of fun to pin them all against each other in a bracket. And you probably noticed that the last matchup is a wild card where I just grabbed two characters that I love and that I've been dying to talk about. Also, if this video does well, I will be making a similar bracket for backstories, but this time only on villains. And that's why there are no villains in this one. But without any more delay, let's jump into the bracket and find out which backstory is best. So in the first quarter we have One Piece, and we are going to be looking at Nami versus Sanji. Now I cannot stress this enough, but just about every character in One Piece has an amazing backstory. Brook's story breaks my heart. Chopper's story, well, breaks my heart. Oh, and then there's Robin, whose story also breaks my heart. And let's not forget about Zoro, who, well, I feel like you guys have the idea by now. One Piece is full of depressing but amazing characters. But out of all the Straw Hats, to me, it's pretty easy to choose Nami and Sanji when it comes to fantastic backstories. So on a quick side note, I did some polls over on Twitter to find out what you guys think about these matchups. At the end of every matchup, I will share what you guys voted for, and if you want to take part in my next video, be sure to follow me down below. Let's start off with Nami. First off, best girl, but slightly less important, we have her backstory. To start with, Nami probably had a very happy and fun-loving life as a baby. Of course, it's hard for us to tell, since the first time we see her backstory, we get shown her orphaned on the streets of Okyat Kingdom, which I'm just realizing right now is Tokyo backwards. And she is being carried to safety by a girl named Nojiko. But I mean, who's to say that her first few months weren't happy, you know, before her parents and her home were taken away from her. Anyways, luckily Nami and Nojiko are found by the Marine Bellemere. Bellemere would go on to adopt the two girls, and together they lived in Kokogashi village. Sure, they argued from time to time, but that's just like any family. More or less, they lived happily ever after. Until the fishman Arlong showed up and took control of the village. Arlong charged a massive tax on everyone living in the village, but luckily Arlong didn't see the children, so Bellemere would have only had to pay for herself. However, Nami had made a big deal about being adopted and not being a true family. And to prove her love and keep her children safe, Bellemere gave Arlong the money and explained that it was for her two children, just in case they ended up finding them later. And with that, Bellemere was unable to pay her own tax, and that's the moment Nami watched her mother being killed right before her eyes.
Nojiko! Nami!
Luckily though, she was able to live, albeit as a slave for Arlong, forced to draw sea charts until she paid 100 million berries to earn her town's freedom. But even when she got close to earning that ridiculous sum, Arlong just plotted to have the money stolen because Nami was too important to set free. And that more or less brings us to the whole Straw Hats versus Arlong Park fight, and Nami later joining the crew. On to Sanji. Sanji, who is best boy, grew up with eyebrows that looked like spirals. And honestly, what more do I need to say? Next round, Sanji takes the W.
Hey, Briggs, I know I'm not supposed to come out until later in the video, but you should probably talk about him a little bit more.
Fine, Sanji luckily gets two backstories, so for now we're going to cover his first one. Sanji was aboard a cruise ship, working in the kitchen where his two greatest passions were wasting food and the All Blue. The All Blue grew into Sanji's greatest dream, a place where all the seas meet and every fish from all over the world connect in a single place. A chef's paradise. However, everyone laughed when they heard about his dream, saying that the All Blue didn't exist, which, come on, is already sadder than Nami. Sure, she lost her home and family twice, but Sanji was made fun of for his dream, goddammit. Truly a tragedy for the ages. Luckily though, all of Sanji's bullies would be taken care of pretty soon as the pirate Redfoot Zeph attacked the ship. Unluckily, they weren't killed by Zeph, but instead a tidal wave hit the ship and was capsized. The only survivors were Zeph and Sanji. The two of them get washed up on a small island? I feel like it's too small to be an island. The two of them get washed up on a big old rock. It's too high and awkwardly shaped for them to get back up if they were to dive in the water for food, but it's also too barren to find anything to eat or drink. The only food they had were the two bags that washed ashore. Naturally, this villain of an old man gave Sanji the much smaller bag of food and ordered him to the other side of the rock to keep an eye out for ships to save them. Way too many days to actually survive passed and Sanji was out of food, so he grabbed a knife and decided to go over to Zeph's half of the rock to kill him and take his food. Sanji, however, finds the bag of food to be unopened, which is weird. He cuts into the bag and finds that it isn't actually food, but instead is bursting of gold and treasure, which is of course worthless in their scenario. He turns to the old man to see how he survived, and Zeph is pretty much skin and bone, and on top of that, because in order to make sure Sanji had food, he had cut off his own leg and had been eating it to get by, explaining that he saved Sanji because they shared the same dream of finding the All Blue. Now if you remember Zeph cutting off his own leg to save Sanji from drowning, that's the anime adaptation, but I prefer the darker version within the manga, where he literally eats his own leg to survive. Zeph then goes into how he wanted to open up a restaurant in the middle of the ocean to ensure that no one would ever go hungry on the sea again. And when they were rescued, that's exactly what he and Sanji did. Nami's story might be sad, like really sad, but Sanji's story is both sad and heartwarming. I personally prefer Sanji's backstory, but let me just tell you that this is actually only half that gets revealed later within the anime. Based on both my personal opinion and the poll I posted on Twitter, Sanji advances to the next round, and I'll save the second half of his backstory for later. Moving on from the Straw Hats, which is filled to the brim with great characters, we are now focusing on the 7 Deadly Sins, which is also full of great characters, and Diane. But to be fair, it also has Hawk's mama, which brings us back to having 7 legendary heroes once again. I'm going to try to not focus too much on manga spoilers, if I could help it, but if I do, I will give you guys a warning. So, the Fox's Sin of Greed, Bon. Bon has the ability to pretty much take whatever he wants from anyone, which is pretty great. His greed knows no bounds. But what about his backstory? Let me rephrase that. When we are talking about Bon and Meliodas, it isn't so much just their backstories we learned about, but their sins as well. Well, as you might expect from someone who is a talented thief, Bon grew up extremely poor, living on the streets. He continued to steal from people to survive, getting beaten when he failed, and eventually he ended up in prison. There he met a man named Trivago. Wait, like the vacation booking site?
Zvago. It's Zvago.
Ah, right. Well, these two became very close, and Bon would eventually tell him about how his own parents beat him almost every day. Soon after, Bon gets tricked and is in the process of being sold when Zvago happens to try and rob the cargo cart he was on, eventually agreeing to take Bon under his wing and teach the young Sin to steal. Zvago tells Bon about his past and all the legends he has heard. Among them was a story of the Fountain of Youth and its guardian spirit. Bon and Zvago make a plan to rob someone soon after. However, Bon rushes in alone before Zvago gets there. He ends up getting caught and being beaten by the guards, and when Zvago finds himself in a position to choose between saving Bon or saving his biological son, he runs to save his son, leaving Bon alone. Bon would find himself in the Fairy King's forest looking for the Fountain of Youth that sat atop the great tree. However, every time he climbs it, he is swatted down by the guardian spirit Elaine. And let me remind you the cardinal rule of lollies, it's not weird if they are in the hundreds of years old. And Elaine is actually approximately 1,000 years old. Every time Elaine throws Bon from the peak of the tree, he finds some kind of luck and lands on a leaf, or catches a branch, or falls onto the back of a giant bird that is made of winning lottery tickets. Well, maybe not the last one, but really anything you could realistically think of to keep himself alive happens. And he always makes it back up. They basically annoy each other over and over a whole bunch of times until he eventually takes out his 3-section staff and prepares to fight her. However, instead of attacking her, he uses the staff to grab the cup of the Fountain of Youth. Before he can drink from it though, Elaine ensnares him in branches. Fed up with the bandit, Elaine says,
I'm finished trying to make you humans understand. But if the Fountain of Youth disappears, everything in this forest will wither and die. So give up your quest and leave this place.
Alright, fine.
But come on, this is Bon the Bandit, the Fox's Sin of Greed we're talking about. There is no way he could be serious. So Elaine reads his mind, and the only thing he's thinking about is how much he loves the booze made from the berries within the forest.
He doesn't realize I can read the minds of humans.
Man, this really sucks. The ale made with wild berries from this place is seriously good stuff.
And how much it would suck if he lost a place like this. Clearly had his priorities straight, booze greater than immortality. The two end up falling in love, and let me remind you, clearly it's okay because she's actually super old. But once things seem too perfect to be true, a red demon attacks the forest. Both Elaine and Bond are about to lose their lives, and it comes down to one of them drinking the fountain to stay alive. Bond really wants her to drink it, refusing to do so himself. Sure, he came here looking for immortality and willing to risk his life for it, but now all he wanted was to save Elaine, the love of his life. She drinks from the cup and kisses him, forcing it down his throat before she dies in his arms. He got what he came to the forest for, but lost everything he cared about in doing so. Something he would spend the next 20 years until the start of the anime atoning for in any way he could. Of course, when it comes to the sins, none is greater than the captain, the dragon's sin of wrath, Meliodas. Meliodas is seemingly always happy. However, pretty quickly into the show, and especially into the second season, we find out that this is all a mask. In the first season, we see this gigantic hole in the ground that used to be the city of Danafor. And there is just about no other information given, except that this was the result of Meliodas' sin.
It was completely erased at the hands of Meliodas, who fell victim to his own wrath.
But in the second season, Meliodas tries to unlock the power that he had sealed away, and must undergo the trials of the Druids. And while everyone's trials are different, Meliodas' test is facing his past. Years ago, he was a guard in the military of Danafor, and worked with this girl who had absolutely no connection in any way, shape, or form to the Princess Elizabeth. The girl's name was Liz. No, but all honestly, while they look pretty similar, clearly they are so different. Liz is much less annoying after all, and way cuter. And at the end of the day, isn't that all that truly matters when we are talking about shonen women? Meliodas and Liz fall in love, they live and work together, share their hopes and dreams, and it's beautiful. But in the midst of this montage of a beautiful life they had together, she dies. Blood all across her face, a hole in her chest, put there by someone from his very own race. He is unable to control his emotions, his wrath, and he annihilates the entire city. Now, a big part of this scene's impact is that in order for Meliodas to pass his trial, he needs to relive this moment, the moment where she dies, over and over and over again until he is able to control his rage. They don't want to give him his immense power back until he can show that he can control that power. Quick manga spoilers, I know I said I wouldn't, but it's probably important to this, and I feel like I need to say this for this matchup to be fair. You have 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, you have been warned, it's spoiler time. So the reason this is such a great scene is that it ties into the rest of his backstory so beautifully. Meliodas several lifetimes ago was the head of the 10 Commandments, and during a war with the other races, he sided with the goddesses because he had fallen in love with one of them named Elizabeth. These two would go on to be cursed for betraying their clans, Meliodas to be immortal, always being resurrected if he dies, but always with less empathy and emotions. Elizabeth, on the other hand, was cursed to be reincarnated over and over and over again every time she dies, with no memory of Meliodas, but always destined to meet and fall in love with him, and if she ever learns of their history together, she will die in the next 3 days. In this way, Meliodas is destined to watch the love of his life die time and time again. Does that sound familiar?
To gain full control of my power, I have to let go of my emotions. And to do that, I have to forget all about Liz. I just have to get used to her dying.
The trial is his curse manifested, and I think this resonance and repetition in storytelling is just really amazingly done. A test about his past that was foreshadowing to his past. Are the rest of you guys back yet? Well, unfortunately, you won't be able to understand unless you go back for spoilers, but I think overall, I like Meliodas' story a bit more. They're both great. However, according to the poll I did on Twitter, Bond seems to be the winner. Probably all the anime-only plebs. But yeah, I'm going to use my judgment as Lord Brigo, nay, Lord D. Brigo, to declare everyone who voted for Bond incorrect, and Meliodas advances to the next round, because it's my video and I can do what I want. Alright, on to the next matchup. We are diving into the next series where we will be looking at Boruto's dad versus Jiraiya. Now, little known fact, but Boruto's dad's name is actually Naruto. And while they don't go into too much detail in the Boruto series, he actually went on a lot of adventures, taking on Orochimaru, searching for his best friend who had turned his back on the Leaf, stopping the Akatsuki, and even almost defeating Madara Uchiha before the legendary Black Zetsu KO'd him. And that's all the awesome stuff we could have talked about if Boruto wasn't a terrible show. Instead, we are going to be talking about his backstory from Naruto. Now we start the series with him being a social outcast in the village, a total pariah who just about everyone but the Hokage is afraid of. And judging by all the flashbacks, I can give you a definitive statement that Naruto lived about 93% of his life before entering the ninja school on this goddamn tree swing. But the reason Naruto was treated like someone who thinks Emilia is best girl is that when he was born, his mother and father jammed a mythical beast made of chakra inside of his stomach. This was the nine-tailed fox, and it was famous for things like destroying the Leaf Village and being a genuinely good boy when he lived with the Sage of Six Paths. The village was terrified that the fox would escape or take control of Naruto and destroy the Leaf Village again, which is why they all hated him, and they resented him for what the fox had already done to the village. Pretty great parents in my opinion, putting the nine-tailed fox in their son so that he lives a terrible life. But as you go through the series, you find a few more details about this knight, and it makes them seem less like total assholes, and more like, well, human beings doing their best. The Leaf was being attacked by an invader in a mask who was trying to extract the tailed beast from Naruto's mother Kushina, while the seal was weakened by her pregnancy. With the beast being removed and attacking the town in an attempt to kill baby Boruto's dad, and as his claws launched towards Naruto, both his parents jumped in front of the attack and sacrificed their own lives to seal the beast away in their son. Along with the beast, they each implanted a piece of their own chakra, which would later be used to help Naruto overcome the Nine Tails and eventually learn to control and befriend it. A pretty beautiful story, and we are going to be comparing this story to Jiraiya, who, I don't know, likes frogs or something? Next character, next matchup, let's move on.
Hey, you said that I could take this one up and try and convince you that Jiraiya has a better backstory. And let this be a lesson to you kids. If you ever disagree with a YouTuber's opinion, just work as their editor and eventually they'll have to let you correct them. Anyways, on to Jiraiya boy, the pervy sage himself. So let's start with his team when he was a child. Naturally, Jiraiya was partnered with Orochimaru, one of the major antagonists for the entire franchise, and Tsunade, a drunk who became Hokage purely out of her bust size. These three were mentored by Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage himself, which is a pretty solid starting point. However, having such a great teacher, he was still pretty lacking in ability for anything that didn't help him peep on women anyways. A fantastic talent that almost saw him killed by Tsunade pretty regularly. A great risk for a great reward. Eventually, Jiraiya did want to start to improve, and in his training to summon something, he accidentally performed a reverse summoning and brought himself to Mount Myoboku, the home of the toads. While not being able to completely master the sage technique, he also didn't turn himself into a giant stone frog, which is kind of a win. However, while he was there, he was brought to the Great Toad Sage, who made the prediction that Jiraiya would travel the world and meet a child of prophecy, a student who would either save or destroy the world depending on Jiraiya's teaching. And so he dedicated his life to traveling the world and finding his pupil, taking up a hobby of writing a novel on this journey. The first of which was Naruto's father, Minato Namikaze, a fantastic shinobi, probably the best since the first Hokage. However, despite his talent, he never really went on to change the world for better or worse. He was just another chapter in the story. Before taking on his second student, Jiraiya took part in the Second Great Ninja War, and earned the name of the legendary Sannin, or Sage. His next student was Nagato, the child of people who had died in the war that made Jiraiya famous. And if Minato was amazing because of his genius, Nagato was special for having the Rinnegan, as well as for having a dream to change the world for the better. After finishing training Nagato and leaving him on his own, he was given the notice that Nagato had died. Once more, a great candidate for the Child of Prophecy was taken from him. And let me be clear, they aren't just students to Jiraiya. He very much treats them as his family. They are straight up his children in every sense of the word, except biological.
What? What the hell's so funny about that?
Your smile is my salvation, Naruto.
He wasn't just losing pupils, he was losing sons. Cold and hardened and unwilling to risk training another student, he's eventually approached by Naruto, a boy who does everything possible to win over the sage. He didn't have his father's natural genius, and he didn't possess the Rinnegan, but what he did have was a demon inside of him, a goal that he was willing to die to complete, and a genuinely good heart. Jiraiya eventually decides to train Naruto, and would continue to do so before they found out that Nagato was still alive. And before his students would fight each other with the salvation and destruction of the world in the balance, Jiraiya would actually be killed by Nagato. Now, being told at a young age that he would eventually be the teacher of someone who decides the fate of the world is really an amazing backstory on its own. However, what really does it for me when it comes to Jiraiya is his book, The Tale of an Utterly Gutsy Shinobi. And it was sort of an autobiography autobiography about a ninja who was trying to break the curse of cycles of war that the world held, being filled with conflict and hatred. And this was basically inspired by a talk he had with Nagato. Now this all comes to a peak years later when Minato is reading the book and asks if he can name his son after the main character, hoping that his son would carry on the will and spirit of the Naruto from the book. In this way, Jiraiya's backstory brings together the lives and hopes of himself, Minato, and Nagato all together into Naruto, all of which coming together to form the core of Naruto's character. Jiraiya's backstory is so good that he brought together these three stories to make the protagonist's story even better.
What should I name the sequel? Let's see. The Tale of Naruto Uzumaki.
Fine, you win. Jiraiya can move forward. I love Jiraiya. The poll seems to agree with you anyway, so let's just move on to the next round. On to the wild cards. Here we move from sad stories, which I swear was unintentional, to even more traumatic stories. First, we have Levi Ackerman from Attack on Titan. But before we talk about Levi, I just want to thank Axel for joining me on this video and always being amazing to work with. For all of you guys who don't know Axel, he edits a lot of my videos and is always happy to help out. So what we decided to do was a dual collaboration. We made a super interesting video about characterization and character designs in anime that is over on his channel. That you guys should all check out. The link is down below. But on that note, back to Levi. He grew up in an underground abandoned city with no sunlight. His mother was a prostitute and died when he was 5. He was raised by Kenny Ackerman, a crazy murderer, until he later abandoned him. He lived as a thug most of his life. He was threatened into joining the Survey Corps. He watched his friends being brutally murdered in front of him multiple times. And all of this really did shape him into the man that he is today. He truly has a great and tragic backstory, and one worthy of praise within the Attack on Titan world. But it just doesn't compare to his opponent, the Black Swordsman himself, Guts. You really forget how messed up his story is until you look back into it. It's been a while since I read Berserk, so I popped open the wiki and big yikes. Let's just all read this first sentence together. Guts is born from the corpse of his lynched mother under a hanging tree, where he is left to die alone in a mere of blood and afterbirth. So we're off to a good start here. Luckily, he is found by a group of mercenaries and a man named Gambino and a woman named Shishu who adopts him, despite his birth being a bad omen. Then she catches a quick case of the plague, and this is where I start remembering his backstory. It doesn't get better. Guts begins training his swordsmanship under Gambino for the next 6 years and joins a band of mercenaries. The mercenaries are ambushed, and during the night a man named Donovan forces himself on Guts in his tent, later telling Guts that Gambino sold him. Guts doesn't believe him and kills him shortly after. Gambino loses his leg in battle and begins treating Guts like garbage, beating him, verbally abusing him, and degrading him, all leading up to a suicide attempt by Gambino, completely convinced that Guts was the reason for all the terrible things in his life. Gambino tells Guts that he really did sell him, and Guts is forced to kill Gambino as well. Having killed the leader of the mercenary group, he is now a target and was attacked by all the soldiers, eventually being chased off a cliff. When he lands, he fights a pack of wolves before falling unconscious and being found by another band of mercenaries. Is everyone having a good time yet? There haven't really been any jokes in this section, and it's pretty awful, so Axel, wanna play a quick montage of cute puppies and kittens, please? Not those kind, goddammit. Okay, let's keep going. Basically, Guts is cursed from birth, and the closer he gets to someone, the more awful things they will go through. And for the most part, the worse they will betray him. Eventually, he meets Griffith though, and nothing bad ever happens again. Or does it? We'll have to find out in the semifinals because Guts is moving on. Truly an amazing backstory that applies to every aspect of his life and the story. In regards to the poll, Guts of course takes the W as well. So in the semifinals, we have Sanji versus Meliodas and Jiraiya versus Guts. And considering that I've already went through all the characters' backstories once, you should have a rough idea as to what these characters have going on, so it should be a lot faster going forward. When it comes to Sanji and Meliodas, I gotta say I like Sanji's story a little bit more. Both are great, but in the end, the whole story with Zeph is just flat out amazing. The idea that he went through this horrible experience and lives the rest of his life feeding anyone who is hungry is so great. And then we get a whole second backstory with the Vinsmokes, where he is kept in a prison cell because he was a disappointment to his dad just because he was born only kind of superhuman and couldn't compete with his freaks of siblings. He's beaten, bullied, insulted, and thrown away. There are so many layers to it, and every time you pass one insane experience, you find another one. And this backstory transfers so perfectly to his first one that we were presented so early in the series. And the second one was literally presented 800 chapters later. So for all that, Sanji will be moving on to the finals. Jiraiya versus Guts. I can't get into too much detail here, but when the thing happens in Berserk, it is a level of trauma and insanity that I don't think I've ever seen in any other manga or anime or even hentai. Wait, what? The things that Guts has to go through throughout his life just put him on another level that Jiraiya can't even compare with. I'm sorry, Axe, there's no convincing me this time around. Guts' entire life is both literally and figuratively cursed.
Yeah, it's fine, I get it.
And on to the finals, we have my favorite Straw Hat against the Black Swordsman himself, and it comes down to Sanji's tragedy leading towards a heartwarming conclusion with Zeph versus Guts, who has no heartwarming conclusion. It just gets worse. And when it's done getting worse, his life is just eclipsed by something even worse. And honestly, I love Berserk and think it's amazing, but at the end of the day, I prefer a backstory that isn't all downhill. I like a story with ups and downs, and Guts is all down. There are a few ups within Berserk, don't get me wrong, but I feel like they're so not impactful in any way, and they're often just a setup for the next down. I find a sad backstory is best complemented with a heartwarming future. In Sanji's tragic story, we have Zeph saving his life, sharing his dream, and adopting him. We have Reiji looking out for him when she can. We have his mother who loves him so much, she will eat food covered in mud. And of course, you have him joining the Straw Hat crew.
Thanks, you geezer. I'll never forget your kindness. I owe my life to you, old man.
Real men should part without a word, let alone tears.
Sanji's story comes in waves, while Guts' is a straight downward ramp. Now, Guts' story isn't over, and it's truly amazing, but as far as backstories go, Guts' is just so messed up, and I find Sanji's to make me care so much more. However, I do want to give credit to both these characters, as these backstories truly shape who they are within the current story. But overall, I'm going to have to give Sanji the W. He may not be given the most time for fights and hype moments, but my god is he an amazing character with an even better backstory. But hey, I'm a Sanji and One Piece fanboy, so feel free to tell me how wrong I am down below. Let me know who you think should have won. Follow me on Twitter to join in on future polls. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I was recently given a join button by YouTube, and that means you guys now have the option to support my channel directly through YouTube itself by becoming a member. By using the join feature on my channel, you will have access to exclusive loyalty badges in the comment sections that will appear next to your name and in live chat. Access to custom emoji like the Moomin Rider, Hercule Satan, and Lord Twigo emotes. And if you choose to support this channel, you will be given a thank you shout out at the end of all my videos. If you guys prefer Patreon, I also do have a Patreon, and if you donate to any tier, you will also get a shout out at the end of all my videos. A huge thank you to my current patrons, Ace17FFDP, Beck, Mick Manga, Nick Sands, Shoot Alpha, and my highest current patron, Viva the Loser. Thank you so much, guys. And I want to give a huge thank you to my newest patron, Nothing But a Fan, Shinpaku.